This is a Bergen Film Club podcast.
Like an old movie removed from the frame, I am floating and looking for someone to blame. Won't you project me on the walls of your heart? I'm waiting for the real thing to start.
Hello, welcome to The Real Thing. I'm your host, Joel Lawrence. The Real Thing is a podcast that is an extension of Bergen Film Club, which is an independent cinema in Bergen, Norway. In the podcast, I talk about the films that we show at the film club, talk about our handcrafted program, why the movies are cool, why we chose them, providing a larger context, talking to some cool people, yada yada yada. You know that by now. Oh yeah, another really exciting episode. Thanks again to Ella Glendening. Last week we had an amazing interview with her about her film Is There Anybody Out There? And this week, oh yeah, another director interview. Today I talked to the director of the upcoming movie Hoard, directed by Luna Carmoon. The film is getting its international release next month, or it's having a UK release in May 10th. Super exciting. I saw this movie pretty recently. It was awesome, and talking to Luna was equally awesome. What a well-read, interesting, fun, and driven and directed director and filmmaker in person. It was really cool talking to her. She had a great insight into so many different things, the film industry as a whole, the inspiration behind making her film, different takes on grief. Yeah. But I mean, what else can I say? Then if and when you get the chance to go see Hoard, go see it, because I think it's a really unique, beautiful film that calls back to a time of filmmaking that sadly kind of doesn't exist more. So it's really exciting to see these new voices coming out of a young generation, especially someone like Luna, which she talks about how she got into filmmaking or the possibility of filmmaking. So that's enough for me. So I'm going to pass it over to me and the interview. And I really hope you enjoy. This was super exciting. Thank you again so much, Luna, and congratulations on an awesome film. Here you go. Well, yes, again, thank you very much for joining the podcast. This is very nice. We're looking forward to talking about your movie.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, just to start off, I wanted to kind of go through like the process kind of chronologically, but there was a question that I kind of forgot to put in first. I wanted to ask you, I'd been reading in some of your interviews and watching some of your interviews that you were talking about this scheme that you were part of, that kind of took you to make your first short films and then this film. I was wondering if you could talk about that because it just sounded like a really cool scheme and I wanted to hear more about it.
Yeah, it was really amazing. There's never been a scheme like it, and sadly, since our year who did it, basically COVID hit not shortly after their round. So I'm not sure if they ever got to make their films, like the second round of short flicks. But it was crazy. There was nothing like it in the UK, and I don't think internationally either. That it was a scheme set up by Creative England, who did sort of films like The Goob, This Is England, Lady Macbeth.
Oh,
It was before they got, like, quite big. Like, it was before Lady Macbeth sort of exploded. And I'd always loved their films, but I particularly loved this film called The Goob. And I was working in retail. I couldn't afford to go to university. and I basically worked in like a secondhand goods store,
Mm.
and I just kept looking on the computer every day to see if there was a scheme that I could apply for, but you had to have a degree, you had to have experience, and then all of a sudden short flicks appeared, and you didn't have to have a degree, didn't have to have any experience. You just wanted to make a film. And so I went for an interview, and then I think about 40 of us were chosen from the application to have interviews and to do an overnight workshop in Birmingham.
Mm.
And then they sort of just, we did workshops with producers, and I made friends for life on that program. And they're basically like, we're going to give you a month to write your script. I'd never written a script before, didn't know how
Mm.
to write a script. Um, and I was working full time, and then they just we had to pitch our films at Sky Arts to Creative England, and then 5 of us were chosen to make our films, and they basically formulated a team around us. So
Mm.
they then gave us like a 2-day workshop of how to direct actors, what does a crew look like? Like, we were all expecting like 3 people, someone with a boom, someone with a camera, and then little did we know how big a crew was. And yeah, it was really special. Like, I only wish that there was more schemes like this, because it really opened the doors for a few of us. And yeah, it was really special. And that's how I made my short nosebleed,
Mm.
which then led me to making shag bands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a absolute shame that stuff like that doesn't exist more because it's it sounds really wonderful to like, just because someone doesn't have a degree in filmmaking doesn't mean they're not capable of making a film.
No, absolutely. And you don't need to be technical in order to tell a story. You just
Yeah.
need to be able to be good at telling stories. And that is, they gave us the confidence to know that we could do that. And we've sort of, and that's the thing, is like, if you don't go to film school, you don't have them connections in order to formulate your own team to go and make stuff.
Mm.
And they did that for us. I still work with my producer on Nosebleed to this day. So
Mm.
it's quite special.
Yeah, really cool. Okay. Now for the real, not the real chronology, but we're gonna talk about Hoard now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I watched it again last night just for just saying great.
Yeah.
Loved it. Just for
Oh,
the record. I really enjoyed it. Hmm.
I'm glad.
So I was wondering if we can like cast your mind all the way back to making the movie or like writing the script. Like how long were you kind of cooking this idea up for?
Um, it's really hard to tell. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I mean, I wrote the story in the spring of COVID 2020.
Hmm.
Um, but I've never really spoken about, like, before that, in a
Yeah.
way that I was reading a lot of early Ian McEwan.
Hmm.
I was reading a lot of Bataille, and I was watching just as many films as I usually do, but like within that sort of arena of that kind of tone. And I always knew that I wanted my first feature to sort of live in that sort of realm of things, of like, I don't know, I was like, how far could I push this to films that I enjoy, that sort of live in that sphere, that no longer kind of get made or really struggle to get made. And that was sort of cast aside. And when I wrote the story of Hoard, I wasn't writing it with intending it to be a film. I was just writing it as a sort of safety. And I mean, I always say this, but it is no synchronicity that I wrote it when we all just didn't know where we were going in
Yeah.
life, or we were all in this collective limbo. And I lost my sense of smell, which is so integral as to part of the story and the script and even the
Hmm.
film of Hall, that I started to almost taste, as I was entering the filing cabinet of my past and remembering things, a lot of, moments that I'd forgotten in my childhood. I started to sort of taste these kind of, I don't know, these missing smells in a way,
Hmm.
or things that happened. And like for example, the chalk in the Hoard is because of these 3 teapots that used to sit on my nan's fireplace, and inside of them was this really weird blue chalk. I don't know what it was, but it made me feel sick as much as it I was in awe of its sort of color.
Yeah.
Uh, it's really funny because I literally found this picture the other day of like me and my mum there, and then
Oh
that
yeah.
is the color of the chalk in the fireplace, but also these are the teacups.
Oh yeah.
So it's really, really funny though. Came across it
Yeah.
the other day, and they just disgusted me, and they had this sort of metallic like smell, and that's what I could
Mm.
sort of taste in my mouth as I was remembering all of this, and yeah, it just sort of poured out of me this kind of story that I mean the film is disturbing, but the story also has quite a few more disturbing
Mm.
elements in it, and yeah, it really was just sort of this weird thing that just sort of poured out of me and was a sort of mixture of sort of the essence of past and also the essence of the time of them past, like how them sort of errors make me feel when I think of them, that I think we all have about certain times and places, and I'm sure there's a word for that, but I don't have it.
Mm.
And yeah, that's kind of how it kind of poured out of me. And it was, you
Yeah.
know, I was investing in a lot of stuff that sort of reminded me of the world of all, like Cement Garden, like very contained stories in like a house, and
Hmm.
Bluebeard stories of just, you know, um, yeah. So
Yeah. Did you just a side note question? Did you get your sense of smell back?
just about like just that's why I got into perfume so much during lockdown, is
Oh
because I
yeah.
was trying to like be able to smell, and I've got a book back there that was like the history of perfumes and scents because I was so desperate to just smell again. But
Gosh.
weirdly this week me and my sister were walking and I was like, oh my god, I can smell the grass, I can smell, you know, I can smell spring in the air.
Mm.
And but it's not as strong as it used to be, which is sad, but hopefully it creeps on back to me.
Yeah, I'm glad it came back at all. That's like the biggest stress during COVID.
I know it's such an integral part of just like memory making
Yeah.
and just experiencing the world, like food and nature, and yet you take it for such granted. It's like when you have a blocked nose, you take it for such granted,
Mm.
you know, when you can smell, and then all of a sudden it's sort of reaped away from you, and you're like, no,
Yeah.
come back.
I can't imagine. I love to smell things. I think yeah, it would be tough.
It was.
Um yeah. Uh yeah, so I mean you've kind of alluded to a lot of like personal experience and stuff, and like even just then you showed me that example, but like kind of what were there any personal experiences that you were kind of drawing from when you were making the idea and the story?
I mean, yeah, like I mean, Maria is not me,
Yeah.
um, at all. I mean, she's as gross as me. Like, she's as disgusting as me. She has that element, but that's pretty much most of the girls that I grew up with are that level of disgust. And but every character is sort of born out of someone that I grew up and was around in, you know, different time periods. You know, the sisters Holly and Ellie are based on real people, as so is their mum.
Hmm.
Uh, even down to the tattoo on Michael's arm is actually a sort of ode to the guy that Michael is. I mean, Billy was not actually like Michael at all, but
Okay, that
Michael was, yeah, like I go through an experience like that. However, like that first initial idea of Michael was born out of a guy called Billy, who
Hmm.
to me was the only sort of guy that I didn't feel like had, which is again completely different to Michael, but that I didn't, he didn't have a threat to him. There was I don't know, a calmness to him that I'd never experienced with a male before.
Hmm.
And he was a foster child of a neighbour. And yeah, so that's like a little ode to Bill because he's no longer here anymore. But
Hmm.
everyone is kind of based off of someone or something. Like Larabe is based off my best friend growing up, who
Yeah.
did live opposite me, and she's just wild. And all of them stories are true. The exorcism is true. Uh,
Okay. It's crazy.
Pete is, yeah, Pete is true. Um, like all of them sort of stories are kind of true, and yeah, Debo has such a great performance that she just, even when I first met her and she came in, I was like, oh, you have that the real Arabe has this
Mm,
I don't know, this magnetism. And yeah, I mean, so much of it, like the skeleton, the hand in the skeleton is
hmm.
something that I got kicked out of assembly and I just walked down the hallways and I went into the classroom and I just was in awe of the skeleton pelvis and how it felt. It felt like a Mr. Whippy ice cream to me. And then the teacher came in and I got caught and I was sort of loaded with all of this shame that I had not attached to this movement and this area on the body.
Oh
That
yeah.
was one of the first sort of ideas of, like, there's a scene that's actually cut in the film where the teacher does come in and berate her for what she's doing.
Mm,
And she's sort of loaded with this shame. And that's what happened to me. It's sort of my first sort of inkling of like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this because I know it's attached to shame and to do with the body that I didn't quite understand, but I knew in feeling. Um, so loads of that stuff, yeah. Like even Mother and Michelle were sort of my grandmother and my mum sort of double helixed,
mm,
sort of different elements of them sort of heightened. Um, but yeah, so much is true, but so much is not. Like this, it's sort of peppered the truth throughout, and I'm sort of the only person who knows.
mm.
You know.
I think that's at least for me what made the story feel so like easy to kind of slip into in a
Mm.
way because it feels so like lived in and real. And I guess
Yeah.
that comes from taking inspiration from your own life and stuff.
Mm, I'm glad. Yeah, it is.
Mm. Lastly, just kind of on this note, if there was any kind of inspiration you were drawing from more of like a, and which kind of leads to my next question that I know you've talked a lot about, like a penchant for the 60s and the 70s
Yeah.
films and stuff. And I was wondering if there was anything that you were like directly drawing from when you were making or thinking about making Hoard.
Trying to think. I mean, like when I was first sort of writing it and formulating the visuals, it definitely was um, literature and. But there's a lot of photographers that I pulled from in terms of Hoard, and they're all going for me now. It's like whenever someone asks me like my favorite piece of art, and I'm like, mine just absolutely flatline. There's a lot of photographers from the 80s. Not
Yeah.
it wasn't like Martin Parr. It wasn't. I've always liked sort of Richard Billingham because
Mm,
Richard Billingham's photos look a lot like my family photos. So for me, I never thought Richard Billingham was a great photographer because I just thought, well, they're just family photos because
mm,
mine look quite like that. But his film Ray and Liz, I feel like just really captures a certain time in England and a certain atmosphere and feeling that sort of no other film has really done that in that way for me.
mm.
That's modern, at least. That is a period piece. I mean, like the pub scene, there was a whole sequence in the pub scene as well that was loads of people kissing, and it was like a strobe effect, but the strobe had broken. It was really beautiful, actually. We cut it,
Oh yeah.
and it that was very much based on sort of the Bob Carlos Clark, the sort of pub kiss um, piece that he did of like all the couples snogging in pubs back in the 80s. And I mean, yeah, it was a lot of sort of literature I was reading at that time, and mainly was a lot of my family photographs,
Mm,
actually, which is what we used to sort of create the look of Mother and the Hoard house and also the other house, because the Hoard house was a set, and we basically, my production designer Bobby and his team came and measured my actual living room and took the old photographs from the living room and basically recreated it.
oh yeah. Wow.
So there's a lot of weird synchronicities that happened. We used to have a piano, an old piano in my living room, and you see it in the Hoard house, but
Yeah.
the actual address on that piano was weirdly the road that my nan grew up on in Hackney, which is miles away from where we are. So there's a lot of weird things that kept happening as well as we were filming. And a lot of my family photos are in the Hoard house and bits and pieces. But even the door, like the way the door is with the sort of glowed plates in, like everything is sort of placed in where it was, kind of in a way. My nan wasn't a hoarder in that way, but our house was definitely cluttered. And yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, a lot of music as well. There was a lot of sort of music that I was listening at the time that sort of ended up formulating the sound of how I wanted it to sound, sort of sonically as well.
Yeah.
So Basil Kirchin was probably like the biggest influence on like the score,
Yeah.
and he scored a lot of sort of 1970s, 60s British films and had loads of personal projects himself that are just so interesting, that the score and the sound are just as part of the story as the characters, and that
Yeah,
was always
absolutely.
something from the very beginning. Instead of it just being like a later choice, it was always, there.
Hmm.
And I was listening to a lot of Funboy Free when I was writing.
Mhm.
Which, a lot of visuals actually from their music videos and colours of sort of pieces that they were in at the time. Funboy Free were quite an influence on sort of the colour palette, and sort of hard mustards, reds, and sort of primary colours. But yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, just about colors and stuff. It like kind of clicks on my next question. Is that I felt I'd written that at times it kind of felt like a almost like a dirty Willy Wonka kind of film.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, which is, I mean, absolutely a compliment. Um,
I understand.
yes.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, like just kind of discussing the motif of grief in this way. I kind of
Mm.
wanted to ask about like kind of where did that come in when you were kind of deciding when you were writing, like kind of
Mm.
using this trash as a motif or metaphor for grief, or was it kind of something you were looking for, or it just came naturally kind of when you were deciding?
I think we were all sort of in this melting pot of like collective grief, and we were all thinking of, how fragile life was at that time,
Yeah.
like during COVID. And I think I was also thinking a lot about my memories, and I was thinking a lot about my grandma and my relationship with her, and I knew that that would be the catalyst for this character who would sort of spiral into a sort of delirium. And I kept thinking of the book Perfume,
Hmm.
and that that kind of moment in Perfume where he goes and sort of hides in a cave, and he doesn't even realize that he's been in a cave for like 5 years because he's just been in his imagination, and that he's
Hmm.
completely built this world around him. And that was kind of how I, like you can interpret what happens at the end of Hoard, but in my imagination, there's a version where, she's on that site and she stays there forever, that she burrows herself down underneath all of that stuff. And just like him, like Plato's cave and like Perfume, she lives there forever in her imagination and in her fantasy. And that could quite possibly be what happens to Maria. Um, there's a book called Important Artifacts, and it's about this too. It's a real book and it's a real catalogue from a couple in New York that basically they decide to split up, and they're selling everything, all of their memories and souvenirs of their life together.
Hmm.
And this is a real auction that happened in New York and was a way of sending their relationship off and their objects off. And each listing had the memory attached, and it's sort of the deterioration of their relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really great. It's by Leanne Shapton. Yeah, the Important Artifacts and dot dot dot. And it fascinated me that you could tell a story through objects, and it's a bit like that moment in sort of 20th Century Women, the Mike Mills film, where he has, all of the objects lined out and
Mm.
these photographs of them. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if you could tell a story through objects and the sort of the memories associated to them and the feelings attached to them, and how sometimes you'll be watching something, something new, and you'll see an object that reminds you just of one that you had when you was a child. Like I
Mm.
remember watching Xavier Dolan's Mummy, and there was a radio in the background that I had not seen since I was a child,
Yeah.
and my brain sort of exploded. I was like, oh my God, I remember that. Like, I remember having that in the kitchen. And I walked into a charity shop not that long ago, and my nan's sort of exact bed covering and curtains were in there. And my brain was just like, oh God, remember the texture and laying on that. And
Mm.
it sends you back. And I kind of knew that that was going to be the sort of like tethering of the story, and that the sort of trash, holds so many. I mean, it's like the title of Hoard. Like, there's such a play on trash,
Mm.
in society and in sort of books, and how we talk about it and what it means to us now more than ever, as the world is just building and building and building, and there's more and more stuff than there has ever been. And I don't know, I was sort of became fascinated with that, how that could be someone's safety, and I sort of understood that, and sort of saw that in my nan, in all of her sort of collections that she had. And yeah, so it's sort of an amalgamation of them things, really.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it was kind of like nice in a way because I feel like at the same time of everyone being incredibly materialistic, but it's also kind of like tacky to be materialistic.
Mm.
But I think it
Oh,
was, hmm?
I was so anti-minimalist at that
Yeah,
time. Minimalism was everywhere at that time. I remember people like watching loads of videos of people like, I've whittled down my belongings to like a still water bottle, like a mattress, and like a notebook. And it filled me with such rage, because
yeah,
it's the complete opposite of like sustainability, like getting rid of everything that you've collected throughout your life that you have collected to need, like, and then you end up buying more new things instead of buying things to last and
mm,
wearing things to last. That is something that I really wound me up at that time, like everything being stripped back, whether it be fashion or the
yeah,
aesthetics of like interiors, that I just became so angry with, that I I wanted to see loads of things, because that really is what's you know is happening in our world,
yeah.
unfortunately.
I feel like good or bad. I always feel like people are their things, like people are their clothes and the things that they have in their home. Like you look at that and you think that's that person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Truly.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that,
No, me
unless
neither.
unless hoarding. Anyway, um, yeah, but like it's just fun to think. I felt like I was feeling so connected to the film throughout it, and there's something I wanted to ask you about is about kind of like I love when a film kind of like does Englishness right,
Mm,
I guess.
yeah.
But just kind of like a side note, I was talking to my mum yesterday about doing this interview, and
Mm.
I could hear her like searching you up, and she
Love
was
that.
like reading, and I was telling her about it, and she was like, "Well, you tell her I think she's done really well for herself."
Aw,
So
that's lovely.
you got the thumbs up from my mum. But
I
she's
love
like,
that's all like
yeah,
mums.
yeah, mum stamp of approval. Yeah.
Oh,
But she's such like
I
a
love that.
uh anti-hoarder. She throws
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
So is my mum, believe it or not. My
Yeah.
mum is absolute minimalist. Hoovers the fridge,
Yeah.
hoovers the grass, is crazy when it comes to cleaning. But no, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
But kind of similar to that because like I'm English and I like seeing that done like when I watched After Sun, for example. obviously great movie,
Mm,
just in general, but I enjoyed that it like really showed the real kind of like English holiday experience.
mm,
Um,
yeah,
but in making this, I felt like it really reflected that kind of like very specific British lifestyle, like of the school. And like I felt like, I was transported back to being a primary school when they're sitting in the assembly hall and
yeah,
talking about like Savlon and even like chilblains. That's something that like my family talks about all the time.
yeah. I
But
love them.
yeah, just wondering if that was something kind of like you think is important to you in making films. I mean, obviously being British, but like to kind of show that side of England through films and stories.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's something that was much more, I don't know, like prevalent in the sort of 70s and 60s at least, like British
Hmm.
films. That is why I like them so much, is that I don't know, like class wasn't exactly as much as a talking point as so much as it would just happen to be like these characters were from here.
Hmm.
They have this dialect. This is not what this story is completely about, but that life and that world is so clear and bubbling in the background that isn't directly the story that is being told.
Yeah.
And I feel like we kind of have got trapped in this kind of, I think it's least progressive as it, like it was way more progressive in the 80s, 90s and pre than it is now, because people are so focused on, I mean, there's not enough people in exec roles in general that are from different walks of life, so
Mhm.
they kind of want a safari like version of what they think working class is. And so what you then get is a lot of upper middle class people making films about working class stories that
Hmm.
is kind of just become sort of an entry point into film in sort of the last 10 years. And it's just so boring, and so boring for people who are actually from them worlds to watch themselves. That is sort of like, is always sort of grey scale. It's
Yeah.
always really bleak, really grim. There's never any vibrancy. And of course, like stuff like that is changing. Like even something with like Rye Lane, like
Hmm.
Rye Lane completely reminded me of actually sort of like films from the 70s, like in its structure,
Yeah.
of sort of the two people are just spending the day together, and it's of all the spaces and places, it's like really Antonioni. Like when you really go back and watch that, it's like, him going for a walk in Blow Up. And it's probably no coincidence that the director is American, that like they were allowed to do that, and it just explodes. It really does, I don't know, radiate something different to a lot of British films that have been made, I think, the last um, sort of decade. But I also am from this world, so
Yeah. Yeah.
we shoot where I live. I've always shot where I live, and
Hmm.
it is very much like my experience. So I hope it feels real because
Yeah.
it is. And um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not interested in sort of like poverty porn, which I think
Yeah.
has been quite rife. And it's, yeah, I've often been sort of like argued about that when I've been making my shorts, even, and just what people think working class is or what they think it looks like. And it's obviously so different now, like present day, but I don't know whether I'll ever make anything in the present day, because it's it's not doing it for me.
No, it's
Now, no,
not
I'd
my
rather
vibe.
live to see in past. Yeah,
Hmm.
not my vibe for sure. Yeah.
Hmm. But I think that is a great point, that there is quite like a great disparity now in kind of like there is a huge focus on class, and
Mm.
I like that you said poverty porn. That's a good point.
I used to sort of be like, oh, should I say it? Should I not say it in interviews? And I've just got to the point where I'm like, well, that's what I believe. Like, that's
Yeah.
truly how I
Hmm.
feel with a lot of the British films that I've watched, and um, that aren't made by people who are from them worlds. And it's not to say that I don't think people who are not from the world should be able to make things about that. I do, but I just think it's, you've got to ask yourself what is the intention behind that and why. Um,
Yeah,
but
definitely. it just got me thinking about the Joanna Hogg movie, The Souvenir.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, because that's the kind of motivation of that really kind of spoiled rich woman is that she wants to make a movie about the
mm,
mine the coal workers in Sunderland.
mm.
But everyone's
Um,
like, why? Kind of.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because like I'm from Newcastle,
yeah,
so it's like I'm always curious when people have some kind of like opinion or viewpoint of the Northeast, I guess, because it's never
yeah.
right. Hmm.
No, yeah, because there's not enough people from them areas who get to make films, and
Hmm.
it's so messed up. Like I actually am one of the only, I am the only person from BFI Network that received funding from outside of London to ever make a feature with the BFI. And
Really?
we only got that funding because my producer is from Manchester and lives in Manchester.
Yeah.
So one day I will say something about that publicly, but
Okay.
I only found it out recently and I was, wow, I thought it was really terrible. It's really
Yeah.
sad,
Hmm.
you know.
I guess there
Yeah.
is. Oh, I guess that's just the nature of filmmaking. It's a kind of uh sticky nepotistic web.
The whole every creative industry is like
Yeah.
that, and it's crazy the people that you think are working class and then you find out you know they went to these sort of private schools that have their own tunnels to the beaches
Hmm.
and that they all know each other, but that's the whole point, is that it's like that because you know they all say to one another, I won't mention that my husband is so and so if you don't mention that I went to this school. So it's like this innate silence of like enabling people to, and that's why a lot of these kids get to make these films about worlds that they're not from, is because they're like, well, you don't mention that, I don't mention that, and this will be what we think that is, and why
Hmm.
it feels so 2D and flat is because they don't understand them well. They just want them to be that, so they think it will sell, which is usually boring.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why it's great to have filmmakers like you.
Oh, thank you. Well, if they let me make stuff, they're not so happy with me about the sperm jokes at the moment. So
Oh yeah, that was
yeah,
I was going to ask you about that actually. I
yeah,
was going to talk about kind of like the production side and making the film, but I had read that there was a sperm perfume.
yeah.
Yeah,
There was
there was.
there was. I mean, it wasn't just a sperm perfume. It was this French perfumery that sort of made perfumes with sort of backstories. Like there was one called the Violet Cigarette, and it was about this old woman who was once beautiful who just eats Parma violets and smokes in a pub, and that was like the whole story around one perfume. There was
Okay.
one called the Fat Electrician, and then there was our one called Secretions Magnifique, which is just like blood, sweat, sperm, milk, all kinds of bodily fluids, and it yeah, it sort of spiraled out of hand when Joe said that I sprayed sperm on him while shooting, which is not true. I mean,
Yeah.
no one knew that this perfume existed until, I mean, recently, apart from me
Mm.
and Bobby, who would sort of spray it as the story went on, and she she fell into delirium much more. That it just, yeah, it,
Yeah. Okay.
what can I say? It spiraled. Way
Mm.
weirder things I'm sure happened on set, but the sperm perfume is a one that's stuck.
Mm. Okay. So no sperm was sprayed on Joseph Quinn for the record.
So
Okay.
for the record, I have rectified that multiple times. It's still stuck. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Um, yeah, well, I guess we talked a little bit about how you kind of uh decorated, for want of a better word, the Hoard house.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and just I felt like the production design was really like keyed in. I just thought that um like Haley Squire plays Mother Chelsea. I thought her. her wardrobe was incredible. She just
Mm.
looked great in every scene. Um,
Mm.
I also loved Janice's hair, the neighbor.
Yeah. All natural. She's great. She's a stand-up comedian.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Sandra, she's so funny, like
Hmm.
so funny. I honestly would bring such levity to the days as much as like she did on screen.
Hmm.
Like she sort of is like the thermometer of where Maria's at, but also would sort of like bring a levity during them really dark times. Is Sandra also just did that whenever she would come to set, we would all just be hysterically laughing
Hmm.
because she's just so funny. Um,
That was
yeah.
another kind of like connection is that it really reminded me of my when we would go to my nana's house, my nana and my
Mm.
granddad, like that permed neighbor. I feel like is such
Yeah.
like a fixture in every single nana neighbor
Yeah.
situation. And she'd always be
Mm.
like waiting for us when we came, just be like, "Oh, what's going on?"
No, I know them women very well. My
Hmm.
nan used to take me over to this woman's house, Gwen, and I don't know what went down there. I feel like they were probably playing poker or something odd, but I'd always end up rolling everyone's cigarettes for them in like a little
Yeah.
machine. As like a 7-year-old would just be rolling them. I think
Yeah.
that's why I don't have any addictions to anything now, is that my nan just allowed me to do anything. And I'd be like 7, I'd be like, oh, nan, let me have a go on your cigarette. And I'd just go and give it back to her.
Yeah.
So she saved me from a lot of addictions. But yeah, then women are just integral, I think, to sort of like working class areas. I feel
Hmm.
like there's less of them now, like as
Hmm.
I get older, like them sort of old girls. But yeah, I knew plenty
Yeah.
of Sanders.
And they're all
Yeah.
kind of friends, but they all kind of hate each other. And yeah.
Yeah, real nosy neighbour. Like I remember
Yeah.
when our dog went missing once, and this woman was like, "Oh, I saw him trotting up the road earlier," and I was like, well, my mum was like, "Why didn't you grab him?" She's like, "No, he's just going for a walk." So on a main road.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
uh,
Mm. Uh, yeah, I wanted to talk a little about this kind of um because in the Hoard house when we're with Maria when she's young, with Lily
mm,
Bow Leach and Haley Squires the mother, kind of working with them because I just think because it's very insular, very like closed in um feeling and their relationship, like you really feel like it's just them in the whole wide world. Like what it was
mm,
like working with them and also I guess also like what it's like working with such a young child, I guess.
yeah, I mean Lily's amazing. She'd never done anything before apart from like little school plays, and I knew straight away. It was really weird because her and Sarah came through in self tapes the same week,
Yeah.
and I saw Sarah first of all, and I was like, "She's it." I knew straight away, and I sort of did some deep diving, and I ended up on her dad's Instagram and saw loads of pictures of her as a child, and her and Lily Bo Leach as children looked identical. That both of their parents were spooked out when I showed them the sort of side by sides because they just couldn't tell who was who.
Hmm.
And I brought Lily Bo Leach in, and I just started to talk about. I feel like the one thing I haven't lost since I was a child was the sort of language of like how things felt.
Hmm.
And I have synesthesia, so like numbers and letters have colours and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I started to talk to her about seasons, and I was like, what color is Halloween? What color is Christmas? What color is this word? And she just kept getting all of the right colors and how I associate them. And she just had this sort of inquisitiveness that none of the other kids have. Like the other kids were very, I don't know, like felt they were of technology, were of like their generation, whereas she was obsessed with snails. Like we would often be like, would take us a while to shoot because if there was a snail on the floor, she had to pick it up and put it on a wall.
Hmm.
Like there was just this kind of childlikeness of someone of that time and of just sort of our time, pre internet and smartphone, that she was just still fascinated with like insects and animals and you know things on set that I think probably would have disturbed a lot of other children. She was just fascinated with and just
Hmm.
wanted to understand more so, and just felt very natural to her. And She was just great. And then we literally didn't have even enough time to have them spend a lot of time together, Hayley and
Oh yeah.
Lily. So we only had one afternoon where they met and they just sort of walked around the Hoard house together and just sort of got to know one another. But it kind of worked out perfectly because the first scene that we shot with her and Hayley was the morning after she gets burnt by the iron.
Yeah.
And so there is this withdrawnness with her mum anyway, but it
Mm.
worked. She was still not comfortable, you know, with the camera. Like it happened very quickly, but it was perfect that that was the first scene that we shot because it sort of made absolute sense that she feels a little bit detached from mother after that night, and worked in our favor. And then soon enough, they just would just get dizzy, and they just became like mother and daughter. They were like
Mm.
dizzying together, like in this world, and just I think I definitely intentionally created that part of the script and story as a lot of games and
Yeah.
a lot of rhymes, so it felt like she was playing as well and felt very natural and
Mm.
didn't really feel like she was acting. And most of the time, she just was playing the games, like she was playing hot and cold. She was,
Yeah.
um, just being silly with Hayley, and would often just do what she wanted, like the popcorn bit when she's like, it's snowing. you know, she she made that up. She just started
Yeah.
to do that, which became a nightmare resetting every time, but also just was perfect and made her sort of loosen up. But and Hayley's just phenomenal. Like she, I just think she's like the Anna McNanny of like Britain. Like,
Mm.
and I think she deserves way more center roles, way more leads. There's a reason like so many sort of auteur directors are drawn to her, and I've never known someone who to just hit the take first go.
Yeah.
You could just use the first take with her. It's perfect every time. Like
Yeah.
she just can access something. And also she's from that world. Like me and Hayley grew up in places not very far from each other. So we
Yeah.
understand this other world attached to when we're working. That what we go home to is very different as opposed to perhaps, some other people. So we just connected.
Yeah. But kind of off the back of that, I feel it was kind of one of my questions is that I feel like there must have been like a very good understanding between you and the actors because the film, I mean, is kind of filthy and dirty.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I feel like the actors really weren't, you don't feel any reservation from them,
Yeah.
um, which is great, obviously. But I was wondering when you were writing, kind of,
Mm.
'cause it's not a process that I understand well, like, did you have any reservation, kind of like, ooh, can I do this scene? Can I make this as filthy as I wanted to?
I mean, always, but I'd rather apologize later than ask for permission with a
Mm.
lot of things. Not with my actors, like they were very aware of like what we were doing, and I think because everyone just had so much love and care for one another's safety,
Mm.
they would just up the benchmark themselves. There was like things that sort of also like COVID guidelines, like the spitting scene.
Oh
We
yeah.
were meant to cut so they weren't lapping up each other's spit, but they just went for it because they were in character. And just there's plenty of things that make me feel physically ill when I was shooting it and watching it and just, oh, I couldn't do that. But it just they would just do that with one another. Like they'd be like, no, we can do this, we can up it, we can make it more like this. And so they naturally did that just because they felt so safe on set, because I majoritively had close sets for
Mm.
almost all the scenes. That was sort of like either Hayley or Mother or like Joe and Sarah were very much close sets all of the time.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I think that's why. I mean, I was very conscious, yeah, of what is allowed and what isn't allowed, but they accepted to make the film.
Yeah.
As in then the execs, and so they got what was on the page in a lot of ways. But I was aware that there's not really a ton of films that go to them places now. Like, of course, even like 10 years ago or like 7 years ago there would have. But I think just sort of the plane of the world that we live in is very much hyper conscious of what's wrong and what's right. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of go further into. So we have Michael, who's played by Joseph Quinn, and then Maria is by Sarah Lightfoot Leon, which was her first movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm.
incredible, by the way. I'm very excited to see what she does next. I loved watching her in this.
Yeah, she's amazing. She
Yeah.
just goes to all them places and just is so happily so, like is like a child in the way that she just is having fun. They're
Mm.
both very different performers. She's very much like animal and feeling, and he's very much like, why would this happen?
Oh yeah.
I'll walk down 4 stairs and upstairs, and that sort of friction in not within their personalities, but in their sort of how they both like to work, created a friction, but a really great friction that helped them both sort of as the story became more kinetic.
Mm.
It just helped the deterioration of their sort of relationship. Not that there was a deterioration between them as people, but
Mm.
it's definitely when people work differently, there is a, oh, how do we work together and how do we make this happen? And it's a sort of constant magnet pull one way or another. And it really helped them sort of tell the story that they work in such different ways, and they're both exceptional. But yeah, that was her first film. And yeah, she's in a Netflix series with the writer of The Revenant that will probably be coming out this year.
Well,
And she's got a great role in that, and I'm sure she's going to explode everywhere.
yeah. Just like Joseph Quinn. But this was filmed before Stranger Things, right?
No, it was weird. I mean, no one knew he was in Stranger Things. Like nothing had been announced.
Mm.
I didn't know he was in Stranger Things, but I'd just been watching him in a lot of British TV for like the
Yeah.
last couple of years. And he filmed, I think he just recently finished filming all of it because he had to keep going back and forth because of COVID.
Mm.
And he I think he'd not done anything like this, so he was just totally up for it, and also just loved films. And sort of, yeah, we had no idea that was going to blow up or he was going to blow up, but pretty wild.
Yeah, very wild, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just have such a great energy and relationship and chemistry in this film. It was like really, really fun to watch them, and I feel like it made it even more like biting when it started to like deteriorate because you kind of like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you guess I got so much joy watching them kind of be gross together in a way.
Yeah,
Mm.
me too. They really go some places, and yeah, they just have such great chemistry. Like
Mm.
even the chemistry tests, I didn't do chemistry tests with anyone else. I always knew from just meeting them two that it was just going to be them two, and I got a lot of aggro for that. I got a lot of people like, you can't just do chemistry reads and it just be chemistry read like with two people. And I'm like, yes, I can, because I know I just
Yeah,
know they're going to be great together,
yeah,
and they were. They
they
were
were.
really cool.
Yeah, just kind of from their relationship, I don't know if this is not super related to the film itself, but like through the story in a way that like something so like their relationship is so it's like it's nice, but it's so self-destructive and toxic in a way.
Mm.
Um, but like, do you think that that kind of relationship, like good, can come from that?
No.
Okay.
I definitely it's weird, isn't it? It's like everyone else has a completely different interpretation. Like everyone I meet has such a different interpretation of what their relationship is. But for me, it's like she's in love with things in the past and trying to access the past, and
Mm,
he's in love with her, but he's simply just a tool. He's just as much as a pool cube as the pool cube, and
yeah,
the iron for her of a way of just accessing the past. And in fact, he just becomes a sort of nuisance,
yeah.
as
Hmm.
it goes on. But he uses her to you know, like a lot of men who date women ages that they shouldn't, use them to access um, the past and
Mm,
to access that sort of childlike nature to exploit it in a lot of ways. And
mm.
he he's not a good guy,
No, yeah. Mm,
but he's also a human, and he's also sad, and he's also been in a survival mode for so long that
yeah.
he probably never got to experience a childhood or a teenagehood. It's just been, you know, work, school, work.
Yeah.
So, but,
Yeah. I think that just says something negative about me rather than I definitely understand this kind of punching towards older guys, I guess.
yeah,
The guy kind of and I was like, cool.
yeah, yeah. We've all had that.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully I'm getting out of it. Um, yeah, I think it was kind of a fun question. Like, like, is there a freedom in being filthy?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what life's about, is being filthy. And if you can do that with someone else, and you can access and feel safe enough to do that stuff with someone else, bravo. You know, some
Hmm.
people can live their whole lives not being ugly and being filthy, and they become a different kind of ugly because of it. And
Hmm.
they often resent people who can access that. And I don't know, I think filthy is in. Bring filthy back,
Yeah.
you know. You're too obsessed with being pretty. We're too obsessed with being skinny. We're too obsessed with being perfect and perfect skin. Like, I log on to Instagram and my reels are like, how to get a jawline overnight. This
Hmm.
is what you should be eating, and it's like an egg yolk and a slab of meat, or it's like a pecan nut and a bowl of yogurt,
Hmm.
or it's like, this is the new kind of laser treatment. This is the new kind of plastic surgery, and it's like, oh, can we just go back to being animals? You
Yeah.
know, can we revoke all of this stuff and just know that being on this planet is just not about being pretty and pristine and clean and perfect? That I think we'd all be a lot fucking happier if we lent into the ugly, and that's
Hmm.
not what we focused on so much of the time. And it's, I don't know, as soon as you sort of relinquish the idea of how you're perceived or how you look, which is what's so good about Michael and Maria, is that they are kind of already free from that. Is
Yeah.
why they can be like that with one another, is that that is not a main focus in their life. They're both people who are on the outside of the zeitgeist. They don't care about trends. They're not interested in music or subcultures or movies. They're simply just existing. And maybe we should all take a leaf out of their book and just
Hmm.
be
Definitely.
gross, just be open to that kind of connection with people, because I think that's all that we all really want, really, is to be
Yeah.
able to be like that with someone else.
Absolutely. I think that's why I and probably so many others get such like pleasure out of watching them just kind of be
Yeah.
really gross with each other. Because I think when they kind of first started, I was like, ew. But then as it went on, I was like, you know what? Yeah,
Yeah.
I have no
It's,
issue. I wish I was doing that.
yeah, we all do. We all might be. We don't
Yeah.
know. And
Hmm.
that's what's so great, is that these things happen behind, oh, that sounds really dark and seedy. It happens behind closed doors. But
Hmm.
you know, it's, you don't know how people are with different people in their life, and it's what makes life interesting and exciting.
Hmm.
So
Definitely.
yeah.
Do you think people are trash?
Do I think people are trash?
Hmm.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And we, yeah, in so many different ways, people are full of all different kinds of things, but they all smell the same. You know, like
Yeah.
bins. You know, all bins. It doesn't matter what you eat, who you are. On a hot summer's day, they all smell the same. So yeah, I do think people are trash.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Um. Okay. Just lastly, two one point to make and then one question. First
Cool.
point, I really appreciate the kind of the Rat King shout out.
Yeah.
this has been something that I've been like really almost obsessed with since I was a kid, is the concept of Rat King.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate seeing that in a film.
I'm glad because
Mm.
me too.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
I
are
remember
fascinating.
it was in
Um,
Adventure Time when I was a kid, and I was like, I need to know more about Rat King.
yeah, they're
Yeah,
wild. They are just absolutely wild, and
yeah,
I wish to one day see them. You know,
me too. That's my
play.
dream.
That's
Okay, and the last question that I had, I appreciated the serial
mm,
features in this film,
mm, yeah.
and I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite cereal?
I think considering I've got the same line in my short and Hoard. I probably will have to say Rice Krispies because I did eat them probably 360 times of the year for about 15 years of my life.
Yeah,
And, the line in Hoard and the line in Shag Bands is hard on top, soggy on bottom. And that is just how I like my Rice Krispies. Full fat milk,
yep.
you know, hard on top, soggy on bottom. Just the way I like them. No
Yeah.
sugar. That's it.
No sugar. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'm a pretty heavy sugar putter on Rice
Oh,
Krispies.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So my I would like do it myself when I was a kid and then bring it into the living room. My parents would hear me like scraping the huge amount of sugar off the bottom of the bowl because I'm just eating sugar basically. It's
Ooh,
just
nice in the milk though.
yeah, it's just an excuse to eat sugar, I think.
Yeah, I see that. That was me with strawberries and sugar as a child. I just grind it into like the
Oh yeah.
sugar
Yep.
on a summer's day. Nice.
Very nice. Yeah. Um yeah, are you currently working on anything new or just getting ready to kind of put this film out into the world this year?
I am working on something new. I did adapt a book, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I
Hmm.
am writing the script of my next thing at the moment that I hope to. I mean, they want me to shoot it this year. Whether or not that will happen or not, I'm not sure. I've got to
Hmm.
finish it first. Um, but it is quite a bloodthirsty tale that is set over quite a few time periods in London, and yeah, it's
Hmm.
quite. I promised myself I wouldn't have any blood in my feature because there's plenty of blood in both of my shorts. But
Yes.
now I'm rewarding myself with this one, and it will probably have more blood than anything I've ever made. So yeah.
Lovely. I yeah, I'm a very big horror thriller slasher fan, so that sounds great.
Well, put your seatbelt on because it's going to be a ride.
Awesome. Uh,
Cool.
yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for this. It was a
No,
really great.
yeah, it was great chat, and I'm sure I'll end up speaking to you again someday.
Yeah,
Definitely.
really hope so. Woo. So that's that. Thank you, Luna. Thank you very much for being on the podcast, talk about the film. This kind of concludes our little fun director time, and it's like back to regular scheduling from now on, talking about the film club's films. But what a pleasure and what a privilege. Thank you for the opportunity to do this, Bergen Film Club, if you're listening. Uh, it's been really awesome. Good to develop my own skill. I feel very lucky to have been able to speak to these two wonderful directors, Be- beautiful, amazing, talented women. We love to see it. We love to see them making movies and with such unique perspective. So it's great. And we've got some fun episodes coming up, and yeah, it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. But thank you so much for listening. This has been really cool. This has been The Real Thing. I have been Joel Lawrence. Goodbye. This has been a Bergen Film Club production. Our music is by Wise John. Check them out on Instagram at WISEJohnOfficial. Our logo is by Pia Sofia Brentersen. This episode was produced, mixed and engineered by Joel Lawrence. Our researchers are Inke Schilpreiben and Mamina Nazmajid. Want to talk to us about films? The please send us an email at podcast@bergenfilmclub.com. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter @TheRealThingPod. Check us out on Letterboxd at BFK The Real Thing. Thank you and goodbye. Listen, follow, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts.